Hey. Boop. You want to go for a walk? So I'm going to tell you a story. It's a meta story about my experiences of being an active reader of certeaus, the practice of everyday life. I might not have understood things the right way, but as a reader I brought my own experiences, read for the things that were the most relevant to me, even though I tried not to be a biased consumer of the text, and filled in gaps where there might not have been any. In short, I deployed tactics as I read, and the result might be successful or not, depending on who's judging. I am, in certeau's words, an unrecognized producer, a poet of my own acts, silent discoverer of my own path in the jungle of functionalist reality, and as a consumer, I produce through my signifying practices. So here are 3 things that I have made from pieces of other things that exist in culture. A written response to certeau's book, which is up on Angel, a meme that references pop culture and my love life, and this YouTube video that smashes all of these together while giving you a voyeuristic opportunity to see my dog and I tactically explore McCormick Park in Williamston. Lacan said that the unconscious was structured like language, and certeau seems to be pushing this even further by saying that everyday activities are structured like language. Certeau offers a lot of examples, some of which I'll touch on in more detail here in this response. But first I want to share how I understand 2 central nuggets of certeau: consumption and production, and strategies and tactics, because I'll be using them in the rest of this response, and if I'm way off, I want to kind of give you some context of where I'm coming from. So, strategies and tactics. Strategies are the more rigid structures handed down to people. They are things like the structure of the city we live in, the items that we buy, and the vocabulary that we have. These are all strategies. Tactics are how these things get played with by actual people. Is this an oversimplification? Yes. Am I way off? Maybe. Am I going to continue? Duh. So, okay, kind of one quick side question to think about. In our contemporary consumer capitalist society, does the line become blurred between production and consumption? If companies are marketing more and more products as things that are customizable, is this a place where strategies are adopting tactics to further push their strategies? Maybe, maybe not. Think about it, I'll keep going. Production and consumption. Certeau says that consumption is production. So I'm going to give an example of this, but I'm wondering if I'm confusing production with reproduction. So I went on a date Friday night, and it was a little awkward. It was Friday night, and it was a 6 p.m. coffee date. We talked for about 2 hours. It wasn't forced conversation, but he definitely seemed a little nervous. When the date was over, he said goodbye, and then he pretty much bolted in the other direction. Later, when I was telling my friend about it, the Fry meme came to mind, where he kind of has his eye squinted and the top says not sure if, and then the bottom is a or kind of statement. So I have so internalized pop culture that I now think in memes. I took this one step further and actually made one, and it says, not sure if socially awkward or just not into me. So there are a couple things that are being consumed and produced in this meme. The show Futurama, the character Fry, the idea of a meme, and the feeling of confusion about whether a boy liked me or not.
Come on, let's go.
So to return to my question, is my meme an example of reproduction or production? Is certeau, when he talks about consumption, is he talking about the exact moment where something becomes internalized, or is he talking about the various ways that things get spit back out? Or is this the same thing? Am I splitting hairs where there's nothing really to be split? Okay, I'll keep going. Narration and theory tactics. Discussing theory, certeau seems to echo Foucault when he says that the ways of operating do not merely designate activities that a theory might take as object, they also organize its construction. He goes on to explain that narrativity is always already part of theory. Anything that we study that deals with human beings is made up of human experiences. So trying to take the story out of practice is not right. So is this similar to Lyotard's call for micro-narratives instead of meta-narratives? this kind of transitions nicely into reading. So I think de Certeau's discussion on reading is particularly interesting, especially in relation to the ways we've talked about language so far this semester. He describes reading as being an act of production for the reader instead of simply an act of consumption, and describes the act of reading as making the text habitable for the reader. So this makes sense. We don't passively read words, and we often find spaces to interject our own experiences and glean meanings that may or may not actually be there. So for example, I put my meme on Facebook so that other people could read it. I expected that everyone who reads it is going to be kind of putting their own meaning into it. So whatever meaning they make of it, whatever personal stories they might lay on top of it, the meaning of the meme doesn't change for me, and the gist of the expression will probably remain intact. But my question is, does it matter? Once I put it out there, it can be taken any way possible, right? I don't have power over it anymore.
Thank you.
So this kind of ties back into stories and reading as production. So it seems to me that stories and narration are slippery, which is kind of a characteristic of tactics, right? They come from memory, and the speaker can be tactical in how she chooses to relate information to her audience, like I have been doing with you. So this action, or possibility of action, seems like it would be valuable to discuss in terms of reading. We know the receiver of the information, whether it's spoken or written, is going to make something that means something to them. So I guess my question then would be, is the speaker or the storyteller, is it tactical or is it strategic? In what position of power does one kind of become the other? Can tactics ever become strategies or not? So I guess I'll end with this quote that's up there. I kind of think it sort of sums things up well for what I've been talking about. De Certeau says, "In the technocratically constructed, written, and functionalized space in which the consumers move about, their trajectories form unforeseeable sentences, partly unreadable paths across a space. Although they are composed with vocabularies of established language, those of television, newspapers, supermarkets, or museum sequences, and although they remain subordinated to the prescribed syntactical forms, temporal modes of schedules, paradigmatic orders of spaces, etc., the trajectories trace out the ruses of other interests and desires that are neither determined nor captured by the systems in which they develop." So I look forward to discussing this, and thanks for listening.
You want to go for a walk? Just kidding.